I'm going to read you something to start off with. I think by this time you understand how, maybe not entirely, but how conscious parenting works. Um, this a lot of the use of self-reflection and awareness. The practice of conscious parenting is all about awareness. It's a great emphasis on awareness, meaning um, the use of self-awareness to work on the parent, the self. So parenting in and of itself through the conscious lens is entirely a practice. So there is no, or there really isn't a particular way to be a conscious parent per se. So what I mean by that is because it is an ongoing practice, um, you are evolving over a period of time. So, for instance, your awareness can grow over time. Your empathy can grow over time. Your humility can grow over time. These are some of the things aforementioned are not really values or traits that we focus on in relation to parenting, meaning we just parent. And most of parenting can be directive. The directive, meaning I want to teach my child respect. I want to teach my child to be civil. I want to. There really isn't anything wrong with that per se. Conscious parents just approach it very differently. Okay, so it's just so it may be more indirect. In what I mean by that, actually, I'll get to that then. So there are three ways to actually teach a child. Okay, not according to conscious parents, but in general, there are three ways to teach a child. But what conscious parents do in those three ways may be different. So, for instance, well, I'll tell you the three ways, and then there's only one that I really want to speak to. Okay, in any case, um, explanation is one of those ways. It's the most common form of teaching or parenting. Explanation is when you are explaining. You're teaching by way of verbal, let's say, command. So it's not just simply explaining what you need from the child, but it is the tendency to teach through um, like some parents. An example I gave of last week, who may be inclined to teach thank you by telling the child thank you. Remember, make sure you say thank you, because if you say thank you, it just shows that you're polite. So that's one way explanation. Okay, remember, it's neither wrong nor right. Conscious parenting is just different in terms of how to instill. Um, in the installation, what the parent teach in conscious parenting may not be similar compared to other parents. Like respect is an emphasis in your normal mainstream style of parenting. It is not in conscious parenting. Now, respect is something a parent like myself keep in mind, but we prefer to teach consciousness. And the reason why is because consciousness, under the umbrella of consciousness, already resides the respect that if you're conscious, you understand the rules of engagement. You're very sensitive to how you relate to other people. And why this is significant is because it's really two-part process. The first of which is that if you're conscious, you are mindfully empathic of others. But I think what makes conscious child uh, unique is a process of introspection or self-reflection. To, for example, honor another human being or respect another human being, I must be a particular way. So I must figure out what I need to do for myself to be respectful for the other. So a conscious parent may be inclined to understand the importance of the power of respect but added to those elements, the element or the description that is respect, um, humility often follows or is attached to that. Gratitude is attached to that. Sensitivity, understanding. Okay. So the first way I was explanation. That's one way to teach a child. That in and of itself or alone is not sufficient. The second way is demonstration. Demonstration. So it is what that sounds like. When Jasmine was about 7 years old, we got this little fish bowl with a goldfish in it. Just a little simple little thing. And she approached it one day and started sort of tapping on it like so. And you can see clearly the fish just probably as anxious as can be. That's what I diagnosed it with. So the fish is probably anxious because you see it just in a shock. So what I decided to do was approach her, and I looked at her, and I said to her, "May I touch the fish too?" And she said, "Yeah, Dada." So I took my finger and just ran my finger down that little fish bowl like so. And then I turned over to her and I said, "Was that okay?" And she said, "Yeah, Dada, that's okay. Can I do it again?" So I demonstrated one more time. This time I took all 5 fingers, well, 4 fingers and a thumb, and just ran it down the fish bowl like so. And then I turned back over to her. And then I asked her, "Did I do it right? Can you show me? Can you show me how to do it?" And she did it. She ran her fingers down the fishbowl like that. And then I returned to her, and this is how I reinforced it. "Asman, you just taught me something today. I'm just going to do it one more time to make sure I got this right." And then I did it again. So 6 months after that, we went to a restaurant in town. It's called Olay's. It's got a big old fish tank in there if you've ever gone. And they sat us next to that fish tank. There was a table on the other end of the entrance. And I'm looking at the menu, and as I look up, I see this. Jasmine sitting in the chair doing this. So I'm looking at my menu, and I see that. I don't want to make a fuss about it. All I wanted to do was to stay present, because what I was seeing was that thing that was that we should teach a child, which is awareness, right? And empathy. So demonstration is a great way. The way that you do it effectively will allow the child to build consciousness. So for them to see the way that you do it is very important. Very important. You getting this, right? It's not too difficult. Conscious parenting is actually very easy. It just takes work at the moment. And I know that I've had parents who say to me that they just don't have the time to do all of those things. But I think it's important to make the time, partly because we we want as conscious a child. We want as much as we can get our child to be conscious. I think it's very important because all the things that we want from the child starts with that foundation, especially empathy and compassion. Okay, so explanation, demonstration, and the third is emulation. Essentially, emulation describes the process by which a child will emulate or copy the parent. So under the description, emulation, what we mean by that is by example. So that's the third way to teach a child to live by example. Okay? I'm going to read something from our book. Emulation here is meant to describe the process by which a child copies the parent. Arguably, the best way to teach a child a lesson is to get the child to emulate what she observes. This is a parent who does not always feel the need to impose or teach externally or directly. And even if we feel the need to teach directly, we should represent ourselves with integrity. The parent who can willfully model for the child by example is the parent who comprises of restorative powers. So this is the most significant way to teach a child. And what I mean by powers is that because of the relationship the child has with us in terms of significance and meaning, the depth of that relationship allows for the vastness of the child's vision and perspective. If I can live by example and present humbly, because the child is built to want to be like me. The results are great. The outcome is great. The meaning in that relationship truly consolidates the lesson. So that's why it's a lot more powerful than any other form of teaching. I'll read this part again. The parent who can willfully model for the child by example is the parent who comprises of restorative powers, and a parent who grants the prodigious offering that consists of the gift of all gifts, parenting wise by way of your presence. This is the parent who can be an exceptional role model for the child. Exceptional does not have to mean perfect. The kind of example that is offered by the exceptional parent contains a lesson within itself. For instance, the parent who maintains a dignified presence is a parent who teaches respect by way of being respectful. The dignified presence by example in this regard becomes a conveyed lesson that encompasses balance and courage. Courage implies having the strength to not denigrate self or others for our own gain. That is also to say, courage is to take our own suffering and that of the child. For instance, it listens to the child with courage. To listen to the child with courage is to listen in a way that helps alleviate the child's suffering. That's one way to help with the child's struggles with anything that you can consider or think of. Your ability to listen a particular way. If you want to teach a child to listen, the best way to do it is by example. Um, Sometimes we have to remind the child, right, verbally, hey, listen to me. Um, and I get that. Uh, what I am saying is that in conscious parent, it really always has to be on us. The onus of responsibility is on us. So there's a concept that we have referred to as responsibility of consciousness, which simply means we as the adult are responsible for our awareness. We as the adult are responsible for being aware. It is not on the child. We as the adult are responsible for being aware when we are not. So when you are aware that living by example is important and you understand the power of parenting by way of presence, or at least parenting wise by way of presence, you develop a profound, what we call recognition. And it is through that lens of recognition that you really start to see yourself. And most of parenting and its process in conscious parenting is a process of assessing, analyzing your thinking, your emotions, and your actions. The reaction is very important, the recognition that is what you are and what you are doing. This reaction is a distraction that will impede the parent from attending at all. So your reaction to the child, whether it's verbal, behavioral, is actually a distraction. The moment you speak up, you will impede your ability to attend at all. Now, to those who feel uncomfortable with that idea, you can speak. I'm not saying you don't. I speak to Jasmine often, but you know where this is going, right? With conscious parent, I speak with my eyes, right? I speak with my nose, I speak with my face, my gestures, my presence. That's conscious parenting. Now, with words too, yes, sure, I may be inclined to do so. Or not. Okay. When the parent is distracted by their own thoughts and expectations, the parent can be too caught up in the reaction while simultaneously missing out on the object of focus to begin with, the child. So the parent fixated on the behavior ignores the emotions that are governing the child. The parent realizes that their reaction makes it difficult for them to do two things. The first is failure to listen to the child. The second is the failure to listen to themselves. When you are speaking, it is not likely that you are engaged in self-reflection. You really can't do those two things at the same time unless you're omniscient. Now, if we show a pattern of constantly getting caught up in our reactions to the child, it will make it very difficult for the parent to learn from their experience. And that's what conscious parents do. They are mindful of that experience, whatever that experience is between parent and child. The parent can become emotionally and intellectually stagnant because they're not learning from their experience. With limited understanding, making parenting difficult for themselves and the child. It is very important that the parent mature while parenting as much as the child is expected to mature under our parenting. To the extent that the child can be is dependent on whether if the parent will be that is mature. To the extent that the child can be mature is dependent on whether the parent will be. Once again, an emphasis on self as parent. And you start to see and understand why most of parenting is really the parent parenting themselves. In the context of my relationship with my daughter Jasmine, that's a 90% of the time it's about reflecting on myself in relation to her. And it doesn't have to be a conversation, engagement, one-on-one. The moment she steps into the living room as I'm watching TV, I am observing. I'm watching myself as she walks over to the refrigerator to get a drink. I'm ever so vigilant. I notice. I'm mindful. I take a moment. I take a moment to ponder. And I may notice how I am responding in the space where my daughter resides. Yes? Are we getting this? The consciousness piece is always tricky, isn't it? Or perhaps not tricky, but sustaining it, maintaining it. Yes? There comes a time when words fail to convey the meaning of wisdom. where non-action is action, called by its name, which is setting an example. Yeah. Being present to the child in the moment is an action, not forced, that teaches both the child and the parent. This is the wise parent who practices the kind of listening that breeds deeper listening. So have you noticed that even in some of the stories, whether it's Vivi or myself or any conscious parent, we are not just listening, right? We are listening to the story, the one that is presented at face value. But then we realize there is always a story behind that story, and one more behind that, and so on, which then allows the conscious parent, myself, you all, to recognize there is something greater here. There's something deeper here. Yes. It is the parent whose speech is succinctly relevant and apropos while kind, benefiting the child, that reflects to the child the sense of her value in return. Your ability to listen and to maintain consciousness as much as you can allows her to see herself, because you're not disrupting the process. You're not engaging conversation that would distract you from the moment. So are you getting this? So your ability to pay attention prevents you from being distracted by your own thoughts. When you are attending, your awareness is on the object of focus. That would be the child, right? But you've learned it's more than that. And here's the story behind the story. While attending to the child, she will give you context that will allow you to see yourself. How she responds next to you will give you a glimpse into what you are. So it's called relational intelligence. Those are high on relational intelligence have the ability to look at another person as they are engaged with that person and they see themselves. Their ability to watch how the other person reacts to them allows that person who is observing to understand themselves better. So how the child responds to you will give you a glimpse into what you are. Now, here's the tricky part in that. The interpretation of what you see. That's so funny, Dakota.
You're just always biased.
There's an exception. Like if you're a psychopath, you're not going to have glimpse into yourself, right?
But you probably wouldn't be conscious of that.
That's true.
Yeah, there are exceptions to the rule. The less than about 2%, right? Yeah. But that means that maybe 90% of us or so are capable of open-minded awareness. Okay. It is the wise parent who encourages the kind of unity for connection to the divine within the child that fosters the kind of growth from child being into child becoming. It is the parent who expresses the kind of intuitive love that posits for the child the freedom to love without question. So, the parent who is wholly attuned to the child allows the child that freedom of freedom, the freedom that is the space that the parent provides for parent and child to help to assist in the child's uh, or to support the child's freedom to be. When the child feels a sense of safety, the child goes through a process of integration. The child integrated over time as they continue to mature has no doubt what she is or what she will be. Hence, the kind of love that we offer is the love that allows her not to question who she is. So, in the context of an unhealthy situation, children, adolescents, and even adults, we disintegrate. We have to, because we need to adapt to the unhealthy situation. So, here's an important piece that I want to talk about. It's something I call duty to benevolence. We have a duty to benevolence. That is to instill that in the child. It's duty to benevolence versus obedience to parent. There's two different ways to parent. If you are the type that is the parent that practices the need from your child obedience to the parent, you will shape that child accordingly to the attitude that you are projecting. Now, duty to benevolence is something different. If you are parenting a child where in your interaction with her, with other people, or those things around her, and your response is benevolence, the child will internalize that perspective. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit about it. Okay. We suggest that instead of training the child to be obedient to the parent per se, the parent instead incorporated duty to benevolence mentality. It is parenting with kindness that helps the child seek and understand what kindness is about. It will help the parent shift from a purely disciplined, focused parenting style to parenting altruistically. That leads to the child to consider benevolence as a response to life. The benevolent parent integrates an aspect of psychological and moral mindedness that depicts the properties of goodwill and desire to contribute to the humanitarian cause. Duty to help alleviate suffering. Instilling the duty to benevolence in the child implies that a child can learn to comply to the ways of proper life by identifying with characteristics that promote well-being in the human being. So if I were to demonstrate or instill benevolence or kindness, let's say, or compassion in my teaching to my daughter, she will develop a capacity for a greater awareness. So awareness, compassion, for instance, it's considered more so in Asia, a form of intelligence. Okay, so compassion as a form of intelligence expands her vision and understanding of the human condition. So when the child So instead of the child saying, I need to do this because if I don't, I will get punished, a benevolent child would say, I need to do this because it will benefit humanity. In other words, the properties of a benevolent life is meaningful when it takes on the role of kind-heartedness and good-mindedness. The act of benevolence will help the child to recognize that she is an important part of the collective, and as such, offer support through the actions of providing service. I'll put it simply. Treating a child as a human being helps her to become one. Can it be more simple than that? Yeah. Mistreating a child it will become a great burden to society. Parents play a critical role in helping the child develop this capacity. The most important lesson a child can learn is indiscriminate kindness that is characterized by gentleness, warmth, generosity, and loving presence. So discipline is the parent who can parent consciously and not forcefully, right? I don't know if tough love has its place. Maybe it does. I just don't know where that would apply. Because I've never used tough love in 17 years working with kids, or tough therapy or tough counsel. Maybe it is needed. I don't know. I have to think about that. Okay, so moving on to this. Penchant for control. That's what I call it. There's this whole thing I call penchant for control versus penchant for actualization. So it kind of falls in line with this. Penchant for control is the tendency for control. We as parents have to be concerned about that issue. It may manifest in different forms, and may even appear. It may appear conducive. Give you an example. I just thought of one. Usually Vivi helps me with this, but she's not here. There's always one student. Hallway. No. Oh man, I've seen teachers do that.
At least you're not locking me out of the room. In nursing school, they lock you out of the room if you're late.
Tough love.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
For
But
real.
you know, the crazy thing is actually you can learn not to be late the next time. So in some situation, maybe that may be beneficial. But I make this distinction often. You can teach a child through tough love; they will learn how to self-suppress. But there's a difference between self-suppress and self-regulation. Big difference. I want you to think about that. Self-suppression versus self-regulation. You want the child to learn to self-regulate, right?
That not be the same as a foundation built on fear versus a foundation built on trust.
Beautifully put. Foundation based on fear versus trust. If you didn't hear that out there, love it. There's a French philosopher by the name of Michel Foucault. I believe he was an existentialist. If I am wrong, please send the hate mail to Helen knows where I'm going. He warned us about this whole thing called power. You know, power and control. Yeah, power. Implying that the use of power has consequences. And the worst of it is resistance. You can impose your power on another human being, but they're gonna only take it so much. They can only take so much. Resistance. That's the danger. Yeah. Danger. So be mindful. And by the way, according to him, the more we exert power, the more resistance we will see.
In the form of sneakiness, resistance, and
Yeah, yes, yes. Manipulation, yes. Even fighting, all different forms of resistance, yes. Passive aggressiveness, avoidance, resistance. The child stops talking to you, adolescent, something has gone awry. But I always have to say it's not always doom and gloom. Because after all, I'm a believer that at least most of us are sentient beings, aware beings, human beings that are aware. So then, in that case, if we can recognize our place in the grand cosmic scheme of parenting and appreciate the predicament we are in, we would have gained the highest perspective, that which is understanding our role as a parent and the responsibility placed on our shoulders. We are parents, and this is our predicament, a predicament that we regard as satisfying. And because we are parenting a child, the child needs from us all things that are done right by us. But it starts with the parents or parents who want to understand. Our parenting, just about every bit of it, is based on my analysis. Looking at myself. All of my engagement is always sending a message, whether I think it is or not. I may not know what that message is yet, but all the more reason why we have to be mindful. So there are different types of messages. They can be good messages. Nonetheless, be mindful, right? They could be not so good messages. Nonetheless, be mindful. So a reminder, parenting is really not just directing and redirecting and prompting and re-prompting and so on, setting rules and expectations, right? That is a small component to me as a conscious parent who emphasizes the power of consciousness. The importance is the relationship and what comes from that. It is the relationship. And you can see that some kids are more attached to some parents because some parents are more attuned. Yeah, they are comfortable with that particular parent. Yeah, they smile more around that. They play around that particular parent. They engage. They can be silly around the comfortable parent. Yes? The uncomfortable parent, there has to be a resolve. There has to be that parent. It would require extensive reversal, replete with acts of kindness and humility over and over to reverse the aversion. It would require a lot to restore the relationship, because trust is very difficult to recover from, or distrust for the parent, the aversive parent. Okay. All right. We're getting close here. Oh yeah. I have a question for you. This is just entertaining, okay? Just to get your head. What do you think is the most dangerous animal on this planet is? I did some research on Google. Google is the best, but I do not trust them. Sorry, Google, hire me anyway. I need money. So as it turns out, the mosquito kills hundreds of thousands of people a day because it carries diseases like malaria, dengue, Zika. Unbelievable. You know what I've been thinking? I thought all these years? I thought it was the child. The things they do to point out our hypocrisy. Holy smokes. I think that's the biggest threat to all adult human beings, because they can see through us. Okay, we're coming to the end here. I'll finish some of this other stuff later. That being said, by the way, I'm being sarcastic, please. But am I, Dakota? Think about what I said, though. I hope that you realize what the child is capable of. A tendency to underestimate them. I did not go over the penchant for control. I give you somewhat of a snapshot of what I meant by that. So the penchant for control versus penchant for actualization. I would say penchant for actualization is the parent's tendency to parent in a way that will help the child become actualized, meaning the child, in simple terms, uh, understands themselves so well that out of that, the child projects awareness. Out of that, the child um, may measure high emotional intelligence or compassionate intelligence. Out of that, the child um, awareness, perceptual awareness is expansive. Self-understanding and their ability to self-reflect is extraordinarily elevated. Um, so I gave you a lot of concepts today to think about. I want you to consider them. Next week is our last week, final week. That means final exams for everybody. I'll have some questions that pertain to some of the things I talked about just to test, to see where you're going with this conscious parenting, i.e., give me a glimpse into you and where you're at in terms of being a conscious parent, okay?